Today we have the privilege to be speaking to a real Chinatown, San Francisco filmmaking legend. We are talking with Arthur Dong. Arthur is an Oscar and Emmy-nominated filmmaker and Peabody and Triple Sundance award-winning filmmaker, over 150 awards as a filmmaker, author, curator, and educator. Arthur's work centers around the Asian American and LGBTQ experience here in America. His films include Coming Out Under Fire, Forbidden City, USA, Hollywood Chinese, License to Kill, Sewing Women, and The Killing Fields of Dr. Hang S. Noor, amongst others. It is such a privilege to speak to you today. Hey, Arthur, how you doing?
Good. And it's great to be at least via cyberspace in Galileo with you.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't mention Galileo graduate 1971.
Yeah, I'm proud of it.
Yeah. You've been on my list for a while. I was like, who should I talk to? And I made a list a year or more ago, and your name was on there for sure because I've met you a few times, and I always enjoy hearing you talk. But this is a good time to talk because your collection just came out in December. Arthur Dong Collection has 8 films on it, as well as bonus materials. Over 760 minutes worth of Arthur Dong material on it.
More than you can bear, probably.
No,
and it's actually, there are 10 films.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
two of my earlier student films are part of the bonus disc. So it's actually 10 films.
Yeah. We'll go all the way back to high school to talk about that first film. So yeah, it's really a cool collection. Available on Blu-ray, reasonably priced for what you get. Really good deal. So everyone should go out, and if you're interested in film, if you're interested in Chinatown, if you're interested in LGBTQ stories, you should definitely get this collection to watch all of Arthur's films. Arthur, we like to start by greeting our guests in the Asian way. So, have you eaten yet?
Yes, I did. I had a chili tortilla thing that I made. Homemade chili. I mean, it's based on the Chasen's recipe. And the Chasen's is a kind of a famous place in Hollywood. It's the chili that Elizabeth Taylor ordered while she was filming Cleopatra in Rome. And she had it flown to Italy because she loved Chasen's chili.
Oh,
It's pretty good.
Nice. You're a SF kid, but you are been in Hollywood for how many years? You've been down there?
I moved down in '84 to go to school at the American Film Institute. So it's been what? Gosh, about 40 years?
Yeah.
That's a long time.
That's a long time.
Yeah, but I miss my hometown.
Yeah. Well, let's dig into your roots a little bit. So you're the youngest of the Dong kids?
Yeah, 3 siblings. That means 4 of us, and I'm the baby in the family.
Yeah. And you can learn more about Arthur's family if you watch Sewing Women. That's semi-autobiographical, or your family.
Yeah, pretty close to it, yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty fun. So grew up in Chinatown. I think you said you grew up right next to where your mom worked?
Actually, I grew up, the first month of my life was at above Yee's restaurant on Stockton Street.
Okay.
You know Yee's, the old joint?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of those apartments. I think I was there for a couple months out of the Chinese hospital. And then we moved over to Vallejo Street above Grant, and right above the sewing factory where my mom worked.
Yeah.
So we would hear the rumble of the sewing machines. It probably put me to sleep, if anything. and I was brought up pretty much in the sewing factory.
Yeah.
First 2 years of my life, I didn't realize this until my mom told me, because I was a baby, but I would be cradled right next to her in the sewing machine. And that's where I was as a baby. And I grew up there and made friends with the kids that hung out there, and that was my playground. Sewing factory.
Yeah, you disagreed with me. I think when I did the interview with you at the bookstore, I slipped and I called it a sweatshop, and you disagreed and called it a sewing factory. What made it so special for you?
Well, the women that worked there may have sweated a lot, and I'm pretty sure they did in terms of the hard work they put in, the hard hours. My mom worked. She started her day at 9 and ended at about 9:45. So she
Mm,
had 12-hour days. And so, yeah, there was a lot of sweat and toil, I'm pretty sure. Although as a kid, as a baby, I didn't witness that. What I witnessed or what I experienced was that these were all where all my friends hung out, and
mhm,
these were the aunties that knew who I was, that was concerned about my welfare as well as their kids, and we grew up. The kids grew up there, and as we got older, we would go outside and play in the streets in the alleyway. So it was a fun experience. It's a fun memory being brought up in the sewing factory.
yeah. So you go to Galileo in the late 60s and graduate in 71. But your first film is 1970, so I'm
Mhm.
guessing this was a high school project?
Yeah. Ron McConnell, my art school teacher, my art
Mm,
class teacher
mhm,
at Galileo. And this, we're talking about 1969, 1970, and the
yeah.
whole idea of independent filmmaking was just starting.
Yeah.
And Tom Luddy, who formed the San Francisco Film Festival and also at Telluride, became a director there. He was teaching a class at at the UC Extension at Berkeley, right?
Mhm,
And the course was to teach high school students, I'm sorry, to teach high school teachers how to use film in the class, how to
mhm,
teach film in the class.
yeah.
So my teacher's homework, Ron McConnell's homework, was to have his students make a film,
Huh,
and that's how my real filmmaking experience started.
yeah.
Was I was chosen to be um, a part of his homework. And I remember he brought us, I can picture this now in the classroom.
Uh-huh,
Mr. McConnell calls us up to his desk and said, he introduced the whole idea. And I was pretty excited. And he said, he pointed to me, you're the director. And I said, okay, well, whatever that means. And But I was disappointed because I wouldn't be able to hold a camera, which is what I really want to do, was
mhm.
to operate a camera. He goes, "No, you're gonna tell everybody else what to do." I said, "Oh, all right." And, I don't remember what kind of specific directions he gave us or lessons, but, we kinda left on our own, and Lilian Wong, the artist, was also in the class, and at that time, he, was involved, and he's still involved in the line dance troupe,
Oh, uh-huh.
see? And, so he gave me this idea of, "Oh, well, it's Chinese New Year's, we're gonna be performing, film us." And that started me off on my actually very first film, Dance with the
Very first
Lion,
film.
where
Yeah.
I documented a Chinese New Year celebration in Chinatown, and
Huh,
Leland Wong's troupe is part of that film. Then my second film, Public, which is the kind which is in the new
yeah,
Kino Lorber
yeah,
collection, uh, was based on then I was on my own. We did the project,
yeah,
and then I was just so inspired. I said, "Well, I want to make another film." And at that time, and this is still about Galileo now,
yeah.
I was a student in an English class taught by Judith Berliner. And her assignment was to write a piece that focused on an entity that symbolizes bad and good. And I chose to write a poem called Public, which is about a 5-year-old boy who is influenced by societal norms, the culture around him, and how he started off as this pretty pure, innocent entity, a
Mhm.
young kid, but is influenced by what's happening around him.
Um, so you win an award though, like California High School Filmmaking Award.
Yeah, it was a California High School Film Festival.
Uh-huh.
And I remember that awards night, it was in Palo Alto. And it seemed to me like a 1,000-seat theater is probably only 100 or 200. But, to me, it was a huge
Yeah,
auditorium.
yeah.
And they were going down the awards, and my colleagues won an award.
Mhm.
And they said, now we're going to show the first prize winner. And they didn't say the title or anything. And they started showing Public.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh, I totally remember the craziness of that moment
Uh-huh.
because prior to that, I had done ceramics, I did line drawings. I always took art classes, and your work might get put on the board, or we show it to our students for critiques and that sort
Mhm.
of thing. But never have I had anything that I created shown to such a large audience,
Yeah.
and it was pretty personal too. Uh,
Yeah.
Not so much that it was personal in terms of that's my story up there, but those are my thoughts up there.
Mhm.
And I was just taken aback. And I totally remember that happening and saying to myself, this filmmaking thing, this medium is
Yeah.
pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah.
And I better be careful and use it wisely. It's really a thought that really cemented my career from then on.
Hmm. And so Sewing Woman was something that was kind of a little bit of a family project in a way, right?
Yeah, at that time, I was working part time at EDD, the Economic Development Department in Chinatown. There was an outreach office on Sacramento and Kearney,
Uh-huh.
and I was bilingual. I was hired as a bilingual interviewer, and at that job, I interviewed. It seems like thousands, but it's probably only hundreds of applicants looking for work.
Mhm.
Immigrants, refugees, mostly Chinese speaking, and many women who were seamstresses. And I heard so many stories about
Ah.
their lives.
Mhm.
And it's like, yeah, that's exactly not exactly, but that's the kind of experience my mom had.
Mm.
And I thought, well, that's a story I want to tell
Mm.
about my mom, about the
Mhm.
sewing woman experience.
Yeah.
Um, and she refused to cooperate. I had already shot footage as an assignment to use a camera. I already shot footage in the factory that's in the film. So I already had the footage. So I had this dilemma. I needed to finish a project to graduate. And of course, my parents would want me to graduate. I was doing it for them, right?
Yeah, yeah.
After all, not really, but for all of us. And she goes, well, I always wanted to write a story about mom. So I'll help you write a narration. And my father, who was a little more sympathetic, said, well, just why don't you just take the photo albums? We had
Mm.
lots of photo albums.
Yeah.
And my brother uh, had footage of his wedding um, here in America. And he goes, well, you can have the footage, if you need to use some wedding footage, for a story. And so all this came together. And that became the family project that is Sewing Woman.
Yeah. So that launches us into some long how long did you have to research for some of these films? Like decades long, some of the collection that you started for Hollywood Chinese and Forbidden City must have taken you years and years to get all that material.
Well, Forbidden City took about 5 years to research. And Hollywood Chinese, I'd say a little more than 10 years. But Hollywood
Yeah.
Chinese, I like to say, actually took my whole lifetime because
Uh-huh.
it's really about the love of cinema from the beginning
Yeah.
onto the actual production of the film. So, yeah. And I think part of me, I choose certain projects because it requires research.
Mm,
And and because I know that with each project, I have to devote a certain amount of time.
yeah.
And if I'm not passionate or have a quest to learn or understand a certain topic, that length of time is not going to sustain itself to from development to production to distribution.
Yeah. No, I would say it is amazing the stuff that you got. And I can only imagine how hard it was to find some of this footage from the 1930s and 40s, as well as just getting in contact with the people. Like you flew all around to get these interviews with these people, and some of them were getting older in years, and you had a time limit. Like you couldn't wait forever to make some of these films because these people are getting a little older, and you had the contact. I don't even know how did you storyboard this, or were you kind of winging it as you went for these big research films that you made? Did you have a plan, or were you just collecting and curating and hoping it all worked out?
I think what's important before I really jump into a film, and this is the pre-development period, is that there's visual material
Uh,
because it's a visual medium. For me, it's a visual medium.
mhm,
You know, I want movement. I want to see pictures. I want to hear things, and I don't really jump in entirely until I know there's footage
mhm,
that I think will elevate the story to an understanding we didn't have before
mhm.
visually. And for example, with Forbidden City, it was after 3 visits to the original owner, Charlie Lowe, to his apartment,
Uh-huh.
that I had that feeling. He said to me, I have this paper bag of film. I said, I go, what? I said, where? It's in my closet. So he brings out this, those brown shopping bags from Chinatown. Back then, not the
Yeah.
plastic bags they have now, but the brown paper shopping bags. He
Mhm.
brought this out and there was a bag full of film. And I was like, whoa,
Like 8 millimeter or
16,
16?
16 millimeter.
Wow.
And I brought it to an editing room and put it up on the machine, the flat, we call them flatbeds back then, Steinbecks. And uh, there was this astounding footage that he didn't even remember. I don't think he remembered why he had it, but there was an entire performance at Forbidden City,
Uh,
early 1940s, and other stuff as well, home movies. And but it was then and there that I said, okay, I've got to film now.
yeah.
And I had already been meeting some of the performers. With Forbidden City, it was happenstance that my best friend, Kevin G, who was living in New York, um, happened to be the stepson of Charlie Lowe.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
okay, so my first interview was with Jadine Wong, the dancer, who lived in New York. So went to New York, stayed with Kevin. So he goes, "Oh, why are you here?" I said, "Oh, I'm interviewing this woman named Jadine Wong, who was the dancer for Ben City." He said, "Well, didn't I ever tell you my stepdad was Charlie Lowe, the owner?" I said, "Did you tell me? Maybe you did, but it's certainly hitting me now."
Yeah.
And because of that relationship with Kevin, that led me to a lot of open doors because all I would have to say to these former performers was say, "Oh, I'm a friend of Momo's," or Momo's his kind of nickname.
Uh-huh.
And he said, "Oh, you're a friend of Momo?" And Kevin would call them and say, "Yeah, he's good. He's good. Talk to him." And it opened, including opening the doors to Charlie Lowe, right? Um,
Mm.
and to answer your question, how do you get started? Well, that's how,
Okay.
for example, this particular film got started in
So
terms of the research and meeting people. And yes, I had to fly everywhere, but that's where they are, right? I have to go where they are.
No, it's so great. I'm so glad you wrote this. You wrote the book too, because it has it all laid out there. Additional artifacts that didn't make the film and the stories, and it's something that wouldn't get it done if you didn't do it. I don't think it would be done. And it's a
Well, now that it's how many years since I made that film? Well,
89,
uh,
35 years.
35 years or so. Now that it's been 35 years, we actually don't. We can say if I didn't do it, it wouldn't have been done
Because those people
because
aren't around.
they're all passed away.
Yeah.
I think it's one thing that I'm very happy about that I did. Yes, if I hadn't done it the time that I did do it, it wouldn't have been done. The
Right.
stories, I mean, certainly the collection of materials could still be there if they still exist. But as a archivist and a preservationist in terms of film, that brown paper bag, if I hadn't grabbed that, or if
Yeah.
someone else hadn't grabbed that and rescued it and put and say, this is valuable stuff, who knows where it would have ended up.
Probably gone forever. Yeah.
And then you hear that horror story so much.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, so where's the material that you had? Oh, I don't know. This guy's
We
doing
clean
okay.
that closet out. Yeah.
Yeah. Where's the stuff that your parents kept? I said, oh, you just thought it was junk. I said,
Yeah.
wow,
Well,
no.
even Charlie Lowe didn't think it was that important.
Yeah, he didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And it took, a while before it triggered his memory of having a bag of stuff.
Yeah. No, it's very cool. Forbidden City, USA is about the nightclub era in Chinatown, SF, and slightly out of Chinatown too, but it's very cool era. And then Hollywood Chinese, I mean, you have everyone that's anyone, in the first part of that film, you have person after person, Wayne Wang, you've got Justin Lin, you've got Nancy Kwan, you've got everyone who's involved with Chinese film in Hollywood from the late 19 teens all the way to the 2000s. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was and I'm glad I did that film when I did that film as well, because
True.
it was before. It was after Joy Luck Club. It was after Chinese Missing, but before Crazy Rich Asians.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, that whole era.
Yeah.
And so I captured the stories at kind of a really pivotal point in the history of the Chinese and Hollywood film.
Yeah.
And it's exciting to capture that point right before it just really hit.
Yeah. Because you lived through it. I mean, you lived through that era, where we went from, blatant yellow face, like really, really blatant yellow face actors like Christopher Lee and what's her name? Louise
Rayner.
Yeah, you had them in your film, which is really cool. And then, who I just interviewed was your old pal, Nancy Kwan, because her book, I saw you do a blurb for her book is coming out in April.
Yeah.
I got to chat with the one and only Nancy Kwan, who's so amazing.
She is, isn't she? She's, she's a legend, right? She's an
absolutely iconic.
She's just so, I don't know. She's so really down to earth.
She really is
about her life, yeah.
But so for that brief moment in the '60s, when her films came out, and then there really wasn't a whole lot. Even until the '90s, and then after that, still not a whole lot. But you documented the ones that were there. You found the ones that were made, and you talked to those people. So that was really cool. Was this a real passion project for you? You said over 10 years, over a lifetime in the making.
Yeah, totally. And I think it became a curiosity for me because when I first started watching Hollywood films, and this would be when in my early or mid-teens, The Good Earth was one of those.
Yeah.
And then The Mask of Fu Manchu, Boris Karloff, and Myrna Loy and Yellowface. And I think because I had seen so many Chinese films from Hong Kong with real Chinese people, with real characters, that ran the gamut from being really comic characters or evil characters to romantic. I mean, it just ran this whole spectrum of characters. That by the time I watched American Hollywood films with Chinese characters that were stereotypes, it was not so much that I would say yuck or how dare they, but it was more of, well, isn't this interesting? This is how Hollywood sees us. This is how they reconstruct our lives or the Chinese lives and put it on screen. It was a curiosity that led me to want to speak to someone like Louise Rayner, who played a peasant in The Good Earth, or to Christopher Lee, who played Fu Manchu. 5, 6 really successful films.
Yeah.
Or Turhan Bay and Dragon Seed, just to kind of like understand from their perspective. And they were artists. I mean, whether or not we vomit at their performances in Yellowface, they were artists in trying to create a character. So I wanted to find out from them, not from critical essays. I want to directly from them, how did they feel as artists doing the work they did in the time that they did it?
Right. For you, speaking of Nancy Kwan, for you, was Flower Drum Song, the movie, a huge moment? Or not so much?
No, yes, it was huge. I mean, there's so many huge moments, right?
Okay.
But that was, yes, of course it was, because
Chinatown too. It's SF Chinatown.
I remember watching Flower Drum Song at the Great Star Theater in 1961.
1961, yeah.
And I still have the flyer from that performance. And it's one of my most cherished pieces of memorabilia. is that flyer from the Great Star Theater with Nancy Kwan on it. I should have her autograph it when I
You
see
should. Yeah, you should.
it. But yeah, well, what was I think pretty striking for me in seeing Flower Drum Song in Chinatown was that was my neighborhood
Yeah.
and was still my neighborhood when the film was shown. And you'd see the film. We saw the film at the theater, walk out, and there we were at Grant Avenue.
Right on Grand F, yeah.
Not the movie Grant Avenue, but the
Sure.
real Grant Avenue.
Yeah, they built a fake one.
And James Shigeta, I remember I was just like, whoa, what a looker. It's
Yeah.
like, oh man.
You weren't looking at Nancy Kwan, you were looking at
No,
James Shigeta.
absolutely. It's like, boy, okay, there's hope, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And no, and then actually being able to meet Nancy Kwan
Mhm.
and interview her and spend time with her,
Yeah.
and since then becoming friends. And,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, a real advocate for her career and acknowledging her career. It's been, you know, one of the highlights for me.
Yeah.
And especially because she's so cool.
She's
just,
very nice.
yeah,
Yeah.
she's absolute. It's like it's just you know Susie Wong, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Linda Lowe is like, wow, I'm sitting here having dinner and just chit chatting with Nancy Kwan. Sometimes I'm with her and I said, you know, I still can't believe I'm here with you.
Yeah.
We're just like chit chatting, you know.
I love it. Yeah, I felt the same way. I just chatted with her 2 days ago. And
Oh,
I felt the same way. You know, I'm younger than you, but I grew up in the 70s, and there weren't a lot of Asians on screen, and so, you know, she was still one of my first celebrity crushes, you know?
yeah, yeah.
She's so great.
You hear that so much from men. It's really
So
kind of
great.
true. And
Yeah.
I mean, of course, you can see why.
You know? Yeah.
My goodness.
Oh, man. So in the 90s, you kind of embark on a different part of your identity. You start going into the movies about homophobia and treatment of gays in America, especially gay men here in
Mhm.
America. Did you feel like this was just time to do it, or did you feel a little more comfortable to be able to do these films in the 90s?
I had to figure that out. Well, you know, there was public,
Yeah.
you know, and it's not like a gay film, but it is a gay film.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's about sexuality and questioning masculinity and what you're supposed to do in terms of being a man, and what is sex, what is sexuality. And it's actually been programmed a bit in gay film festivals.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, um, so actually, my very first independent film was a gay film. It's just that I took a break from that, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I have to think of it. Like Forbidden City is a very gay film.
Yeah, you mentioned that. Yeah.
You know, and there are more than a handful. Well, handful is five, right? Okay, maybe a handful or a little less. People in that film are who are gay, lesbian, or bisexual. It's not explicit in the film because they've asked me not to
Yeah.
make it explicit. But when there are certain times during the interviews, I had to turn it off the cameras because it's, well, I'll tell you about it, but you turn off the camera
Uh-huh.
or the recorder. And especially
Wow.
with my pre-interviews, they would say, well, turn off the recorder, we can talk about it.
And these were people in their 80s. Like, these are people.
70s, 80s.
Yeah.
And, you know, I had to remember that they're from a certain generation where you do not talk about
Yeah.
being gay or lesbian or bisexual.
Right.
Your friends and close family members may know, and that's cool, you know, but you don't talk about it.
Yeah.
You don't wear a pink triangle on your forehead.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and it was a different generation. And I had to learn to respect that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. But what's really terrific is that Alan Barabee, who wrote the book um, Coming Out in the Fire about gays in the military,
Mm-hmm.
which was one of my documentaries later on, before I met him to work on that film, he had been using Forbidden City USA in his gay communities courses about building gay communities at UC Santa Cruz. And he said because for him, it's one of the gayest films he's ever seen. Because if you knew, you knew.
You knew, yeah.
You knew what they're really expressing in the film. And they didn't have to say, yeah, I'm a gay hairdresser. You just knew.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or that I'm a gay vet, because you just knew. So I had been making gay films, although they weren't labeled gay, right? And this is the whole thing about identity, because it hasn't happened so much recently in recent years, but in the beginning of my filmmaking career, there was this need from folks to label me. He says, "Are you an Asian American filmmaker? Are you a gay filmmaker? Or
yeah,
what is it?" I said, "Why?" And I always said, "What?" It always like struck me back when I get in the early days when I get that question. I said, "Well, I'm a filmmaker."
Does it matter? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, in the beginning of these Asian American and gay film festivals, even though I did gay films or Asian American films, one of the other film festivals wouldn't program the other because they said, "Well, we're a gay filmmaker, why would we program that?" And that was something that bothered me in the beginning. And it was when I did Coming Out in the Fire, which is about gay and lesbians in the military during World War II. We were planning our premiere in San Francisco. And I purposely said, I want Cam and Frameline, the producers of the Gay Film Festival, to co-present the premiere. And I want it at the Castro. It was part of the Asian American Film Festival. And I said to I forget who the director was at that time, but I said, I want it at the Castro. So, well, we never programmed at the Castro. I said, well, that's what I want. And, that's, given the story, it's appropriate. And what I had envisioned was having all these Asian Americans come to the Castro. This is 1994. There's still in the height of the AIDS. There was the two communities weren't really gelling as much as they are today. And I said, I'm going to push this. I'm going to push the envelope. I want all these Asian Americans coming into the Castro. And it was great. It was the first time that happened. And of course, now Cam programs gay films all the time. It's just a staple. But in terms of Coming Out of Fire, Coming Out of Fire was my first real gay, quote unquote gay film.
Where it's the subject.
Okay. So, and I remember embarking on that. And and I knew that this was going to be my first blatantly gay, specifically gay documentary, right? It's hard. I don't know really what words to use to call it, but I think you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
And I remember being a little nervous that the gay community would accept me, an Asian American man, telling the story. Which was not large. It's not specifically an Asian American story. But I think what struck me most about Coming Out of Fire, though, was I remember reading a review of it in the LA Times. And what struck me, I think, most was that it reminded me of what happened with the Japanese Americans and the Japanese during World War II in terms of the internment and this discrimination and how they were under edicts of the wartime policies and mandates. They were treated as second-class citizen, put away. And that's exactly what happened to gay and lesbian soldiers in World War II. I said, whoa, that's what I think in terms of telling a story and talking about policy and discrimination and how the other is created and treated and then treated. That's what struck me, and that's what motivated me to tell the story on film. So that's how Coming Out of Fire came about. And then came License to Kill, just about where I profile killers of gay men.
Yeah.
And that came about because I was a victim of gay bashing in San Francisco a few times. And I never had thought about it. But there was an opportunity came when a friend of mine who's from Fort Worth, was going back to Texas. And at that time, 1995, 96, there were a lot of anti-gay murders happening in Texas. And I had, for a long time, for whatever reason, been clipping articles out at the BAR, BAR, the local San Francisco gay lesbian paper. They had actually a page. It was so, anti-gay violence was so bad that they actually had a column each week that reported all the anti-gay violent incidents. And I clipped these articles. And so when my friend said, yeah, I'm going back home to Fort Worth next week, I said, can I go with you? Because I'm kind of nervous about being in Texas. I've been to Texas before and was pulled aside for having pot, but then that's another story. That was a long time ago. I never got arrested, but it was kind of threatening. And so I went with him, and I attended a trial in Tyler, Texas, which is east of Dallas, a small town, where there was a trial of a man who murdered a gay man. And it just triggered all these thoughts about questioning why do certain things happen. Same thing with Hollywood Chinese wanting to meet the actors who played Yellowface, really to find out what it is that motivated you to do this. And in that trial, I met the young murderer. He's a young man. And it struck me that this is what I want to do. I want to meet more of these men who are convicted of murdering gay men and learn about their stories and see what we can find out.
Yeah, that's powerful. But everyone out there, you should go get this DVD set. It's very affordable and it's very comprehensive, and there's a lot of stuff in there. Really cool films, and really it'll make you think, and it'll make you'll learn a lot. You'll learn stuff that you didn't know you needed to learn when you watched these films. So yeah, this collection from Kino Lorber, definitely go out there and get it. Arthur, you got a little more time here?
Yeah. What time? Yeah, I'm fine. I'm good.
Okay, I wanted to pick your brain on some of these, since I think, Hollywood Chinese kind of ends at a certain era. I wanted to ask you about a couple people that are currently doing stuff. What are your thoughts on John Chu?
Oh, just amazing. It's funny. Yeah, I'm working on a new book on a filmmaker in San Francisco during the 40s,
Okay.
Chinese American. I spoke to the daughter of an actress that were in these films, and she talks about Larry Chu, John Chu's father, in Chu's restaurant.
Right, in Los Gatos, I think so.
So, somewhere. I think John Chu's career is exactly what we need in terms of making sure that our voices are heard.
Yeah.
And I really admire is that he not only works on films that reflect on his Chinese background, but also a film like Wicked or Washington Heights.
Yeah.
And we can do it all.
Right.
And have the smaller films that he started with, and also the bigger films. Same thing with Justin Lin.
Yeah.
Or he did the whole spectrum, and it's just so exciting.
Right.
To see that happening in my lifetime.
Yeah, because I heard something you said that you got a little bit of interest. You got an award from AFI, I think, and they kind of brought you to some studios, and they didn't know what to do with you.
Do you want me to talk about that?
Yeah, well, and then talk about that, but also, John Chu did a student film, and all of a sudden the studios were all trying to get him. So it's kind of the.
Did Nancy Chuan saying it's all about timing to you?
Yeah, we talked about timing. Yeah,
it is all about timing.
Yeah.
And in Hollywood Chinese, I document James B. Leong, Marion Wong, Joseph Sanju, who all did feature films prior to John Chu, Justin Lin, Wayne Wang.
Yeah.
We're talking about the teens, 20s, and 30s and 40s, right? But did they break through in the way that John Chu is breaking through? No.
Yeah.
Personally, I had finished a narrative film that was supported by the American Film Institute. And what's a wonderful thing that the American Film Institute does is once you work with them, and complete a project, they'll send you out on meetings. They'll set up these meetings with studio heads. I don't know if they still do, but back then they did, agents, to introduce them to new talent. So they passed my film around and made these appointments for me. This is 1989, 1987 now, 1987, before Ang Lee and Wedding Banquet, but after Chan is missing. So kind of in that era. And passed around a narrative film I made called Lotus, which starred Lisa Liu and her daughter Lucia Huang about bookbinding. And had all these meetings set up. And I'm paraphrasing, kinda, but not really. The reaction to me was great stuff, but we don't know what to do with the Chinese director.
Mm-hmm.
Would they say that 10 years ago? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Even 20 years ago. But that's what I mean, it wasn't even apologetic. It was just more of a reality
stating
check.
Facts, yeah.
Yeah, and they weren't, I don't know, were they being racist or discriminatory? I'm not sure. I think they were just telling me what the facts are.
They're being capitalist.
At that time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's a good thing I had spent already 4 years developing Forbidden City, USA.
You had stuff to do, yeah.
And I really said F you then.
Yeah, yeah.
And said, I don't need this. And I think what really pushed me to work so hard on Forbidden City, USA was, and this is all hindsight and psychotherapy now, is because the people in Forbidden City, USA came up with the same barriers. These artists, entertainers. Yeah. And they said, I don't care what you say. I'm going to do it anyway. And they were so inspiring. And I wanted to get their stories out and tell the world that, despite the racism and discrimination of the entertainment industry, you can go ahead and follow your dreams.
Yeah. No, that's great. I'm glad you did.
Yeah. And that's your question, John M. Chu. So it's like, it's just great to see that. I'm hoping no one's ever said to him, we don't know what to do with the Chinese director. I'm assuming they haven't said that. But there are organizations, like he was in one of the fellows at Film Independent, an organization down here. I used to be on the board of Film Independent. And what Film Independent does is has a program that helps nurture diverse voices, and bring them through the ranks, introduce them to the industry, connect them with people who can further their careers.
Yeah.
Kind of like what AFI was trying to do with me, back in 87, but they only had one step. And that's it. It was, it was a one-time deal. But with Film Independent, what John M. Chu went through was really a whole series of programs or workshops that introduced him to different stratas of the industry. And where I'm pretty sure they didn't ever say, we don't know what to do with you.
Right. No, that's a good note to end on. I think that things like and you've seen it all. So I'm glad that you've made your film so that we can see the past, but also that you're still around so that we can see the present and the future, and hoping that you're going to keep making stuff that keeps us interested and that teaches us things. Thank you so much for coming on and give us some of your time today, Arthur.
No, this has been great. Thank you.
No, yeah, you're a proud Galileo line, so I'm glad to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, don't ever forget where you are or where you came from.
Yeah, no, we'll talk again soon. I'll have you on for something else, I'm sure, in the future.
Yeah.
So, all right, so this has been an episode with Arthur Dong. Go get his collection of films. You can follow him at arthurdong.com and see more stories behind the films as well as current projects that he's working on. That's it for us. Again, everyone out there, thank you for listening, and we hope that you're all happy, healthy, and safe out there. We'll talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.